Welcome back to another podcast. Like we say every week, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe. We love hearing from y'all. We love seeing all the comments and all of the busyness that we've seen on our Instagram and LinkedIn page. We're almost at 7,000 followers on LinkedIn, which is pretty amazing. So thank y'all all for coming and joining us there. So today is another really incredible podcast. Wait until you hear about Patricia Vega's story, not to mention just her whole entire career. So we're going to give you a little snapshot of where Patricia started and where she's at today. And so Patricia Vega is the founder and CEO of Quantum New Energy, a climate tech company based in Houston. Before founding Quantum New Energy, she worked for GE, serving as a global president of the evaluation and optimization business. Prior to that, she was the president of GE Oil and Gas Latin America and the member of GE's regional board of directors. Before GE, she worked for Halliburton and Baker Hughes, having a progressive global career. And her career actually started in the field with BP and Schlumberger. So worked for a lot of big names. Now finally on your own, CEO. It's really amazing to see your progression, and we cannot wait to share your story today.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Jamie and Massiel. It is a pleasure to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Patricia. Well, first of all, I love that you're Latina and that you're Colombian, because it makes us really proud to see a Latina woman making a path for all of us. So it's really cool to see that, because there isn't that many women out there with your skill set. So tell us, you grew up in Colombia. Your dad is a petroleum engineer, and he taught you from a very young age that even though the rest of the world may look different from us or speaks different languages, at the end of the day, we are all way more similar than we think. And that really kind of paved your path into even who you are today, from like those moments when you were younger and him teaching you that. You also mentioned to us that when you were in kindergarten, you struggled with the fact that you were left-handed. And back then, or maybe culture-wise, it was negative. It was like, that's different for you. You should be right hand because that's how most people are. And that was kind of like the first time in your life where you realized that because you're different in whatever aspect in your life or traits, it's negatively perceived, and right away they try to change you. So they kept teaching you how to write with your right hand. And you mentioned that, this experience really shaped you to be who you are today. Can you share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, of course. And so as you say, Maciel, my dad, I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but the way how he taught us was by introducing us to reading. And he will give us books since a very early age that were not just kind of the classical books that kids will grow up with, but he will give us books for Russian kids, or for African kids, or for Middle Eastern kids. So I think through reading those stories and the themes being very similar, the love for the family, the curiosity of the kids, children playing and having adventures, I had this idea that we all are really the same, right? And people around the world, of course, there were so many places, and you can feel very curious, but in the essence, the love of families, the love for friends, the spirit of children was so similar. And then I went to kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, nobody had ever pointed out to me before that I was different for being left-handed. And it was kind of a shock, like, what's going on here? And no, don't take the pencil with that hand, take it with this one. And of course, I struggled tremendously because I'm really, really left-handed. Some people are, can write with both hands. That is definitely not a skill that I had. So it was really through that process that I started to realize that some of the differences that for me I wasn't even aware, they were becoming issues. And they were becoming issues not only from the people that had that preconception that it was an issue and things should be different, but also for other people that wasn't even thinking about it. And now when they realize this is an issue for others, they also make it an issue. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a really early age. I was 4 years old to realize this situation. Eventually my teachers gave up. And they realized that I was kind of trying to make me a right-handed. It was a lost cause. And actually they got to see other things that I had, right? And focus on that. But yeah, there was that period of a struggle. And as you say, that really then started, of course, I never couldn't articulate it in those words and in that way. But I really believe that had been very foundational for me very early in my life to be aware of those situations and to make sure that, number one, personally, I don't let that become an issue because it's not an issue for me. So I'm not going to allow others, people issues to become my issue. It is their issue, not mine. And then second, to try to create that awareness and mindset as I part of teams and organizations and, in my career and in my life.
I think it's really incredible that, at 4 years old, you had somebody trying to change something that you originally just were. You were just that way. And for you to recognize that and then be able to use that moving forward, I think, it was really impactful for you. And it kind of goes into our next question, which, you mentioned when we talked that you really envisioned, you had really big dreams and aspirations growing up. You even talked about like being like a gypsy, which I thought was really cool when we were, when we first discussed this. And, you manifested things, but you wouldn't really share them with others because you were afraid of what they would think, especially having that impact at a young age at 4, being different was not really the best route then. But you overcame that. And as you grew up, you started to let others know where you were headed. And you were like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and let people know where I want to be and who I want to become. And this really was a tremendous change in your career as you climb the ladder. How important is it for individuals to speak up and share their goals, and how has it helped you?
Yeah, no, I think that is fundamental. And you need to start really telling that to yourself. I think that's probably what I developed as a child, that ability. I think every child and every person dreams, but sometimes we don't even acknowledge those dreams. So being able to realize that, yeah, one of the initial ones, a little bit crazy, was that gypsy dream, because I lived in a small town where there were gypsies and they will speak different languages and, the dress and the culture was different. And I loved them. And of course I wanted to be like them, but I that was a secret, right? But it was something I really, really wanted. And as I told you, I'll pray that when I grew up, I could be a gypsy. So I think that's the first step, being able to acknowledge that you have that desire and to explore that idea, right? Even if it's in your own, and then to start building that circle of trust. So for me, initially as a child, that circle of trust will be my sister. We had always been very close. So I'll be able to bounce ideas with her and without feeling judged or criticized, and she'll keep my secrets. And then, eventually that circle starts growing as you find people that you can trust, and then people that can trust in you as well. So I think that is another piece about the importance of employee resource groups and networks, where you can build that safe environment to have those conversations. Because once you start saying it, even if it's in that small group, then eventually you start having confidence and finding your own voice. And then, of course, eventually you have to make the jump, right? And go to places where possibly those ideas will be so welcome, and you'll be judged or criticized or laughed at. But that's okay, right? That doesn't change that is your dream. And you're right. The more you say it and you look for feedback, and also, why not listen why people say no? Mm-hmm. Because that gives you a good feedback loop on, okay, what might be the gaps or the things that you're not seeing, or what you should do or be aware of to achieve whatever goal is that you're trying to achieve. So that was kind of my process. And I would say, yeah, that's something that for me didn't happen overnight. It built over many, many years. But once I found that voice, and I really worked hard to help others find their own voices, I have been always very aware of it, and protective of the fact that, it needs to be heard.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Thank you for sharing. I totally agree. I think we all have to find our voices at some point, especially when you're navigating your career, because a lot of times we may have these high hopes of a future role that you want to do, but nobody around you or even your management team knows that that's where you want to head, and then they'll offer you something completely different. So sometimes it is really important to make sure you are clear with your goals and where you want to go, which you've done through the rest of your career once you found your voice. So thank you for sharing. Let's talk about I would say, difficult moment in your life where you were studying petroleum engineering in Bucaramanga in Colombia, and it was in your second year, and you found out that you were pregnant. Now, it's obviously a beautiful thing. You have a beautiful thing. You have an amazing daughter now, but I'm sure in the moment it probably felt like a very difficult time. Can you share a little bit of your experience? What kept you going? What were your thoughts? Mainly because you're in school and you still haven't graduated, and I'm sure the people around you, or even your colleagues, your family, they could have portrayed that in a negative way of like, oh, she's not going to graduate. Oh, she's done, right? Like that's what a lot of people may have said. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, so all of the above. So yeah, of course, it was an amazing moment and a beautiful moment. I love being a mom, but also a very scary one, and completely unexpected. And the point is, life throws these kind of things at you, and what are you going to do, right? That now this is the reality. What am I going to do with that? So of course, first thing is coming out and letting people know this is going on. And yes, you get all that kind of feedback, especially because at the time it wasn't as common to have women in petroleum engineering school, for one, and then of course much less women that were pregnant. So I think in general, the feedback that I got, even though at the time I had felt as negative, was well intended. And in the sense that, well, maybe this is not a field for a woman. You have known that for a long time, and much less now that you're pregnant. So just be aware. So yes, I found that resistance and that type of feedback. But I was really determined that this is what I wanted to do. I was already in that track, and it just of course forced me to be even more resourceful, because now not only I have to carry on with my classes, but I also have to start making money to provide for my family. So having my own, this is the first time that I have my own business. So that was really my first, or one of my first, actually I did something in high school, but one of my real for making money entrepreneurial experiences. I have to set up my own business, and I have to get a job and continue doing my studies and graduate. And also become very involved in the student organization as well. I think we'll discuss that a little bit later in the podcast. But I think the point is, these things can happen at any point in your life and your career, because there's not really a straight line, and life happens. Sometimes it seems like out of time or out of place, and you just have to be paused and to decide what is important for you. And of course, you're aware of all the feedback that you're getting from friends, family, teachers, industry, etc. But then what is important for you? Because at the end of the day, life continues, and then those decisions are yours to own.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you were telling us this story, you mentioned something that really struck us, because we just recently both have had daughters. I mean, I guess I say recent, mine's 15-month-old, and Massiel's is almost a year, but it feels like just yesterday. But, you know, those first few months are really difficult. And you actually, there was no like policy or leave, you know, in a petroleum engineering degree. And you actually talked about having to bring your 5-day-old baby to school. And the reason why we wanted to bring this up was like, you know, just the amplitude of what you had to handle, you know, school, a 5-day-old. I don't know if I said 5-year-old, 5-day-old to school. Just putting that in perspective, that's such a challenging moment, but yet you still succeeded. You still passed. Obviously you graduated. You know, what kind of mindset advice, or how were you able to overcome that? Because I'm sitting there thinking, you're taking a test, 5-day-old baby beside you, you know, what kept you pushing through that and just not saying, you know what, I'm going to take a leave of absence?
Yeah. You know, I think really a lot of the things I did and I have done in my life have been really through need. right? As I say, these hardships that at some point come to your life, then they represent a boundary. And then what are you going to do about it? In my case, as I mentioned, I was pretty realistic. I need to graduate and I need a salary. I need to make money because I'll have to provide for my family. So once I figure out that was my path, or what I thought was my path, then I couldn't allow anything to stop me from getting there. So yes, it was really, really challenging because my daughter was born at the time of exams, and the school didn't necessarily consider pregnancy or childbirth an admissible excuse. And all of these things, we also always need to put in the context that at the end of the day, it's people in the other end. I'm not sure if I was the first one going through those situations or not. I just know that when I was faced with the situations, the people on the other end, my teachers, decided to make an issue that this was not in the student manual. It wasn't admissible. And I think it's because I was told having a child as a petroleum engineering student wasn't possible. They were making the point that these are the reasons why this is not possible. So here I am in the situation, and you can imagine 5 days after delivering, going back to school with my baby. And it wasn't because my family was bad and couldn't take care of the baby. Everybody was busy, right, doing their thing. So I just have this time window when I have to be in this place. There's nobody else to help me. Well, let's bring the baby. So once I made that decision, I didn't allow that to be noise any further. And I think that had also been a skill that I have developed since my kindergarten and through my life, right? When these things, yes, that's the reality. I'm not happy with that reality, but I'm not going to let that stop me. So I was there, and I did really well in my exam, and I passed my class, and I graduated eventually. So it's just those kind of things, right? I mean, I couldn't change my teacher's mind. I couldn't change the situation. It was what it was. And what was within my control, I was going to take advantage. And what was within my control was to get a good grade in that exam and show them I can do it.
That's this is an incredible story. I mean, you're probably one of the most inspiring people that I've heard with that kind of story, because I can't even imagine being in school 5 days after having birth. I mean, Jamie and I spoke about it on the podcast previously, but it's hard. I can't even wrap around my head what you did. But what's incredible is that when life does throw you those things, you either sink or swim. And you made it a point that, you know, you're going to swim and you're going to be successful, and you're going to prove to everybody that they don't think a girl that's pregnant that had a baby can still graduate, but that was your mission to do it. And truly, I think looking back, you probably would be in a completely different place now if that wouldn't have happened to you. It's like all of these things happen in life in a way that it could be very positive later on, because after that, you can take on anything in the world, right? Which let's talk a little bit about that career after you graduated. So you've had different roles throughout your career, from drilling, production, wireline. You've worked for the majors, BP, Schlumberger, Baker, Halliburton, to now the CEO of Quantum Energy Partners, and you're mainly focused on ESG and sustainability. What do you think has been the hardest and most challenging role in your journey? And what advice do you have for someone facing a similar challenge? So we've spoken about your most difficult challenge life-wise. What was the biggest difficult role in your career?
Yeah, well, I think is really maintaining that. I think in the past used to be called work-life balance, and these days is called more work-life integration. Because in reality, when we say balance, you assume that to be in balance, things have to be static, right? And life is not static, it changes all the time. So it's how do you integrate who you are as a mom, as a wife, as a professional, as a friend, with everything else. And at different points, you have to prioritize different things. And so the first thing I would say is those stories that I'm sharing here, they didn't come without fear, and they didn't come without doubt. And I think that's perhaps the biggest challenges that I have to overcome throughout my life and throughout my career, is those moments of fear and of doubt, and really saying, no, I'm not able to do this. I'm not capable of this. I'm so scared. No, I'm not prepared. I might fail. So I think we all have gone through those moments, and I'm not exception. But sometimes it has been, as I mentioned, the pressure of the need. So the option, if I don't do this or if I fail, that's not an option for me. That's not an option for my family. So I have to go and do it alone. So to be honest, I would say that almost every of those big name companies and especially those progressive, more responsibility opportunity that I have, they always came with those moments of doubt. And I think it's something that we need to be aware and discuss it, because we all face things like imposter syndrome and the doubts, and is my family going to really be taking care the way they need to, and those moments of guilt as well if I go and do that. So I think we all had faced those situations, men, women, and it's being able to, on the professional side, find those mentors and sponsors and resources, and rely on your team and all those toolkit resources that are available, and don't be afraid to ask for help. So I have done that consistently throughout my career, because being a dual career, I not always had the luxury of doing in a linear pathway. Sometimes the opportunities, especially with international transfers and things like that, will come in a different field, in a different company. And then being, of course, the new one, I'll bring fresh perspectives, I'll bring experiences, but I'll also have to rely heavily on the experience and knowledge of my teams, my customers, and look for those mentors. Then on the personal side, having very honest conversations with my family as my kids grew up, eventually with them and with my husband and my mom, who was always with us through all of our moves and assignments. Can we do this? Are we all ready for this? Because this will involve A, B, C. Are we all in this together? And oftentimes it was me assuming that they would say no, that this will be too much. And I always got was yes from those mentors, yes from those bosses, yes from my family. So what I would say is, don't assume that all those doubts and all those mental barriers that sometimes we have are true before you go and validate and have those conversations, as we talked before. So that is the importance, and it all comes together, right? Having that voice, putting it out, getting that feedback. And then if for some reason there are some doubts collectively, find a joint work plan. How could this work for all of us? But I always found, and I have an amazing husband and an amazing family. I mean, they're really half, at least, of what I've done, because I always have nothing but encouragement and support. And it was really a big difference. So I couldn't really point out, I know I'm not pinpointing specifically one position, because all of them had been tough for me in a certain way. But those are the commonalities, and those are the ways how I have deal with those situations.
I love that. I think it's so important, that you highlighted your family and, just the encouragement that's needed, because, no matter how successful people are and you see always the highlights of their career, it really takes the family and the backbone of that to really support and, push everybody forward, because we all struggle with it. I mean, nobody is, prone to not feeling that guilt. I think, especially when you're a parent, it becomes very difficult. And I really, really thankful that you shared that with us. Let's talk some more about, your new role as CEO and really that transition into a sustainability and clean tech world. What made you change over, and what are the challenges of being in this space versus more maybe of an OFS front space that you were throughout your career, and what excites you about it?
Yeah, well, I think there were two main triggers. So one was the realization of the digital transformation, and digital was permeating and permeates almost everything we do in our lives. The way how we do banking, shop, access entertainment. These conversations is enabled through digital technology. And then yet in the energy industry, yes, we're making tremendous progress with companies like Schlumberger, Baker Hughes, and GE at the time for me, optimizing assets and operations to bring energy to the world. I just felt there was a gap in the way how we all, because I realized, okay, I'm an energy expert, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. However, when it comes to energy consumer, I'm just clueless. And I don't know things like my carbon footprint or my energy efficiency. And we supply all this energy because it's the aggregate, is to satisfy the aggregate on all these different points of demand. So how is this, what is available? So that was kind of an aha moment for me. And then the second one was also realizing that in general, I think every company, every individual wants to always do the best possible thing and the right thing. But it's not always obvious what is it or how to do it. So things don't happen just wishing or hoping, right? It's systems and processes get in play. And I think that is where technology and companies have this opportunity, this amazing opportunity to create that. So I just felt, and of course, because what I was thinking about was very small scale, meaning when we talk about edge operations, that was the real edge of the energy industry, the points of consumption. But then, of course, when I started having conversations about edge, we'll call the edge the well site, for example, where we'll go and we'll deploy tools or assets. And that was that still very upstream as an optimization problem. So I just realized many of the opportunities were still similar. The amazing amount of data, the proliferation of data can feel very overwhelming, but it's also a tremendous opportunity for the industry and for the world if we can transform that data into knowledge and an actionable insight and provide the tools and mechanisms for people to start with just have the knowledge and be aware. Some people will be indifferent to that. Some people will start, you're just planting those little seeds and you build that awareness. And then some people will take action right away. But that's how change happens and progress happens. So my initial intuition, of course, was if there's something like this that is happening within the company, because I was so lucky to work at the time at GE, and GE did amazing things. Aviation, healthcare, renewables, etc. So talk to different GE businesses, and are we doing things like this? And yes, GE was doing many, many amazing things, but not necessarily that kind of thing. And then it's starting to explore outside. What could be happening outside? Who's working in this type of space? And I couldn't at the time find a company that was necessarily working on that space. So the feedback that I got from a recruiter was, why don't you go and do it yourself? You seem to be very clear about what is that that you think is missing. Go and have that exploration. And of course, it did happen overnight. So like, what are you talking about? Never thought about that. But I think sometimes you have to be the change that you want to see. And we do it all the time in a different scale and in different ways, in the way how we work with our teams, with our companies, with our customers. Of course, this was something more transformational because it was go and create your own business. So talking about scary moments, but then life happens, right? It was a time where GE itself went through a little bit of a bumpy time, and the merge with Baker Hughes came and what's going to happen. So I said, if I ever going to do it, this is better, maybe as good as as good of a time as it could ever be. So I decided to jump and do it. Really a little bit clueless about exactly what it meant. And one of the things that I always do when I feel in those combinations of fear and still feeling that like a force that is trying to move me and don't know exactly what, I always go back to education. So education has always been something important, and it can be formal or informal, but that learning, that awareness that there is a learning to be had is being very important for me. So what I did in my case, I went to Stanford and study energy innovation and emerging technologies. And it really helped me kind of shape, okay, this is the space I'm going to work, and this is what I'm going to do.
That's amazing. You kind of answered one of the questions that I had in my head to ask you was, you worked for all the majors as you were going through your career. You mentioned that when you were in university or even high school, you had a little bit of that entrepreneurship inside of you because you had started businesses. And it's just, you completely answered. It was more of you found a problem, you're an entrepreneur, someone mentioned it to you, even though I'm sure you were thinking in the back of your head, like, what if I start a business? But when you hear somebody else mention it, and I was going to ask you, like, how did you go about making that decision? It's such a big risk. You were used to getting a paycheck from all of these companies over the last few years, and then you're jumping into it on your own. But you mentioned it was the right time at the right moment. GE was kind of spinning off with the whole Baker deal, and you just saw an opportunity and you went ahead and did it. And that's amazing. Like, it's so incredible, and it does take a lot of risk. So I'm glad that it's worked out. So tell us a little bit about the program that you're launching called Net Zero Hero Program. And it's to inspire and celebrate those who take climate action and contribute to reducing carbon emissions. What is your call to action, and how can people and organizations become net zero heroes? And please explain a little bit for those of us who may not know anything about climate change or even net zero.
Yeah, well, yes. Look, I think we all have to realize we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to make energy more sustainable in a couple of ways. So in a way, it's more accessible because there's still people lacking reliable access to energy. And then in the other side, we have the opportunity to make it less carbon intensive. And we need the two. And of course, that, as we know, is called the dual challenge. And of course, that was part of my motivation and my driver. If we're really going to address the dual challenge, we also need to address the consumption piece. Otherwise, it's really an imbalance optimization problem to resolve. So what we have done in Quantum New Energy is help people and organizations harness, as I mentioned, there's a lot of underutilized data that resides in multiple different repositories. And in our case, we don't realize, but we as people, we have a lot of data that we generate all the time, but it's not being used to extract insights and knowledge. We provide carbon footprint analysis, energy efficiency analysis, and most importantly, we provide pathways on how to improve. What might that mean? Seeking to reduce carbon emissions, reduce waste, and reduce cost at the same time. So it's not either or. And this can be done at the personal level in our daily lives. So we have a product for consumer, and that's really how we started innovating, because one of the things that GE was really great about was something that we call fast works. In the past, and in many of our companies, it takes many, many years to come with a technology roadmap and develop a product, and then you launch it, and the time you launch it, especially with digital technologies, those cycles are just too long. My last job at GE, I was leading a portfolio of businesses that one side we have established businesses, things like drilling, wireline, that was kind of the more traditional piece, but I also had the opportunity to incubate a digital business. I work very closely with GE Digital and others. So that is also what brought that awareness of how things in the tech digital world happen. And then with that knowledge and motivation, go and say, well, you know what? Number one is needed because this technology doesn't exist. But then number two is a way to be very agile, do this really fast, introduce it, get it fast into people's hands and get quick feedback. And then always we do it, we continue to fine tune until we find something that people tell us, yes, this is great, we can do it. It naturally brought us. So on one side, I'm very proud to share, we have been able to serve thousands of people in the state of Texas, and we're recognized as one of the most innovative companies in Houston last year. And it was really something that we did with a lot of purpose. That the energy transition, and that's in our logo, the energy transition is human, and people, nobody needs to be or should be left behind as we think about these technologies and all these innovations. It's been a little bit hard to find that focus in a place like Houston, where we tend to think more about industrial scale solutions, which are very needed. But as I mentioned before, we need to be very intentional about everything that is part of the solution that we're trying to build and address. So for me, the people component is very important. Now, of course, that naturally brought us, as we introduced this approach to companies to build sustainability culture. There's a lot of talk about sustainability, but then similar to safety, it's not going to happen and it's not going to bring all the entire value until, regardless of what is your job title, we all feel this is part of how we work. This is part of my responsibility and this is part of my values. And values are a combination of beliefs and behaviors. So we provide a tool for companies to build that sustainability culture. And it brought us naturally to the conversation of, wait a minute, can we use this for our scope 2 as well as a business? And then, of course, we had learned tremendously through all this experimentation. And we had been doing carbon accounting without being really the main focus, but that's what we had been doing. So very naturally, of course, next extension is, and by the way, you know a lot about drilling and production and all those different things. Can you also help us with our scope 1? So now that's where we are. So we're introducing ESG-Wise, which is now the platform for not just carbon accounting, but really carbon reduction, where we do using AI and analytics recommendations to optimize the pathways to net zero. So what net zero means is we all emit carbon in our daily lives or in our business. And now we need to mitigate climate risk. We need to contain those emissions. And that is achieved mainly with 3 main pillars. So it is a combination of reductions, which is what we try to address with our platform, sustainability platform, but then also with offsets. And offsets is like things like planting trees or promoting agriculture and some of those. And then last one is the removals, where is carbon capture and sequestration and direct air capture and hydrogen and those things. So to think about that, we have the need to accelerate the future with those technologies being proven at scale and at the cost point that we need them for the global economy. But then at the same time, we need to address the reduction and the offset point. So what we try to do with Quantum New Energy and both Enerwisely and ESG-Wise is to provide a pathway to reduce, so the amount that needs to be removed is less. And that is very important because we need to get to net zero in a cost-effective way. And really to balance that equation, not just from the carbon neutrality point of view, but also from the cost point of view, as a business or as an individual, we need to think about those 3 pillars. And lastly, the carbon offsets, we're super excited because we had found the combination of technology and commercial innovation that allow us to generate super high quality carbon offsets locally for underserved communities here in Texas and in some other places around the world. So that will allow for companies to have more meaningful programs when we think about ESG, that you have, of course, environmental is all the carbon piece, social is that piece when you think about things like climate justice and inclusion and local communities and how to bring them and allow them to contribute and to be part of the solution, but also to capture a benefit for themselves. So who is a net zero hero? So a net zero hero is people like any of us in this call. And I invite you both, Massiel and Jamie, to use Enerwisely and get to know your carbon footprint and get in the roadmap of how to improve. And you will save money in the process. So anybody listening. But then also companies that are interested and committed to building a strong culture of sustainability. I want to use the platform, for this purpose, or if they're in the need. And these days, a lot of companies had created or are developing their carbon baseline and making pledges to net zero. In many cases, not necessarily knowing all the details on how to get there. So that is where tools like ESG-Wise is going to be an exciting capability to use. And we'll be launching, actually I learned it from being in this podcast, we'll be launching one of the components of the program is a podcast where we'll invite people that are working on the energy transition to tell us what they do in their work, but also what they do in their lives, so that we motivate people to realize that it's not one single thing. That's perhaps my last comment, that we need to stop being too unidimensional in the way how we look at things. Energy is really broad. Energy is oil and gas, energy is renewables, energy is all those cool technologies that are being development. Energy is energy efficiency as well. It's all of the above. And at the end of the day, energy is people. So if somebody can do something in this way or in that way, we need all of these. This getting to net zero is an all hands on deck exercise. So rather than, bumping heads and saying, oh, it has to be this way or it has to be that way, let's all work together and let's find better solutions and more inclusive solutions, because that's how we really are going to get to net zero without leaving anyone behind.
Well, that was just an amazing end to your great podcast. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I really like how you honed in on it's about the people, and we're all in it together, and you can't look at one company to change what's going on. I mean, we are the end users of this. So we ourselves can make changes in our own life. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. And we're so happy we had you here.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.